And so I think with that,
I think we go to our guest speaker.
I do. I think it's almost time. So we're going to move to our first guest speaker, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Jennifer Anaya, Senior Vice President, Global Marketing at Ingram Micro. As a Chief Marketing Officer, Jennifer is responsible for leading the strategy and the direction of the company's brand, as well as driving growth through enhanced customer experience and digital marketing functions. With 21 years at Ingram Micro and more than 2 decades of technology and industry experience, she's a proven leader across IT as a channel leader, as well as a change agent. She serves on the executive committee and board of directors for the nonprofit of Girls Inc. of Orange County. She's a mom of 2 teenage girls, enjoys skiing, cooking, and entertaining in her free time. Without further ado, please welcome Jennifer to the Women of Impact.
Thank you.
Thanks, Denise. Thanks, Denise. I'm Nicole Kimball. I'm going to be moderating the session with Jennifer Anaya. Jennifer, we are so excited to have you. Each time I've had the opportunity to meet with Jennifer Anaya, she's made me feel like I was seen, and she takes the time out of her busy schedule to make everyone around her feel important. Even with something as simple as grabbing a coffee with me when we were both at the same event, she shows that she cares for the people around her. I'm so excited to introduce Jennifer. Jen, will you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey?
Hi, Nicole. It's always great to see you, by the way, and thank you so much for this invitation and being a part of this event. I was listening in the last couple of minutes, and it was so inspiring to hear what Cisco is doing to connect people and build those relationships, because I think that is so important. And what I would say is, along my career journey, I've learned the power of relationships. It started literally at a kitchen table with my parents. I grew up with 2 entrepreneurs who talked about business all the time because it was our life. And I learned a lot from them. At the time when I was a kid, it wasn't so inspiring. But now that I've gotten older, I realize how much I've learned from them. And it really almost gave me a mini MBA, listening to all of the struggles and the wins, and just, what it was like to have a small business and meet payroll and be responsible for 200 families that, were employed by the company. So from there, I went on, and my first job actually was at K-Swiss tennis shoe company. I was their first PR manager, and I was handed a trade magazine and said, all right, go do PR. Luckily, I had a very practical education, and I was able to have some internships to understand what that actually meant. But I learned a lot. And the one thing I learned from that role was relationships, and really understanding what the editors of the magazines that I was talking to really wanted. And they used to tell me that they appreciated the fact that I would ask them a lot of questions, just so that I could understand what they were looking for from us and then give them what they needed. That company went public while I was there. So man, that was trial by fire, and learning how to go public in a company as your first job out of college. And along my career journey, I've tried things. Like, for example, I was an executive recruiter for like a hot minute and decided that was not for me, because I was way too emotional about people's lives, and I could not deal with, the fact of moving somebody's whole family if that's not what they wanted to do or not. So that was not my job of choice, but I think that that's important, that you've got to try things and see what you like or what you don't like. But I have, along my career, played to my strengths, which is something that I would strongly encourage. I haven't tried to do something that I'm not good at. I was always a writer. I've always been sort of a communicator of some sort. And so when I landed at Ingram Micro and worked in this industry many years ago, I was able to bring all of the strengths and the learnings that I had with me into this career path too.
Great. There are a few things that you said that I would like to just dive just a little deeper. You mentioned building the relationship and the power of those relationships. Could you share with us, I know, with COVID shaking everything up, and most of us, especially here at Cisco, and I'm sure those of you, outside of Cisco as well, are primarily working remote. Do you have any tips for those of us who are remote and not necessarily seeing people face to face to build those relationships?
Yeah, well, first of all, what I heard of what you guys are doing at Cisco with the programs, take advantage of those programs. Man, how powerful is that? To be able to find people and connect with them. We don't have that at Ingram Micro, and I'm going to talk to some folks and see if we can learn from you guys and do something like that here. But I would say, one thing that is very powerful is doing informational interviews. And I know that we encourage that a lot with interns who come here. And I've done that along the way in my career just to, pulse check and understand, is this something I really want to do, or learning more about what, other people are doing so that I can help them and connect more with them from my role. But informational interviews would be a good way to connect with people. People love to talk about themselves and their careers and what they're doing for impact. And so, even just setting a 15-minute conversation, usually people can spare 15 minutes to have that conversation. But connecting more intentionally, with somebody, maybe about a topic or something that you might share that's in common, to connect about. And that might also drive kind of a strong new relationship, just being, having an affinity for something that you can talk about together.
I love that. I especially love the connecting intentionally. So thank you for that. And thank you for the advice. Our theme this year is Inspire Inclusion. And one of the trends we keep seeing and what our members really want to hear about is women supporting women. Can you tell us a little bit about the actions you take to support women and how they've supported you throughout your career?
Yeah, absolutely. What I would say is, women, we are community builders. And I know there's a lot of studies that show that women aren't supporting women, but I believe that really we do naturally. It's part of who we are. For example, I worked when I took a gap from Ingram. I'm a boomerang, so I was at Ingram, I left, I came back. And in that time that I took the gap from Ingram, I worked with an organization. One of my clients was a micro funding organization. And it's where you provide funding to emerging businesses in emerging countries. And most of those businesses are led by women. In fact, the organization I worked with, all of the businesses were women led. And it was time and time again, when we funded those women-owned businesses, that not only grew that woman's family and the family around her, but her whole community around her started thriving as a result of that, because that's the way women think about how to support the whole community that's around them. And it was very powerful. And so one of the things that I've done in, just my personal life is to support girls and mentoring organizations that really focus in on supporting girls, because I know if we can start really young with getting girls to think about their future, about the fact that anything is possible, not to put barriers in their own minds, but to be very positive about it, the more that we have a chance of those girls knowing that they're unstoppable and they can do anything. Girls Inc. of Orange County is a group that I'm currently involved with, but I've had other mentoring opportunities, to really help girls. And I think starting young is important. But in my career with women that I work with is who's your tribe? Who's your team that's around you? And understanding more about bringing people around you who aren't like yourself. how do you find people who you can learn from and relate to? My tribe consists of people who are younger than me, people who are older than me, people who are way more frank than I am, people who are also way smarter than I am, so that, I can learn from them and grow with them as a tribe. And my job that I see here, because I'm on the executive leadership team of Ingram Micro, is what I can do to help raise women up in terms of visibility, in terms of sponsorship, in terms of encouraging the men around me to sponsor women, and to give them visibility for all the strengths that they're bringing to the table. There's lots that we can be doing to support one another.
I like that. In the tribe thing, the women of Cisco Group and Women of Impact Group, we've all been referring to ourselves as Wolfpack. And I think it's so inspirational to get that information to girls at such a young age. From my experience, like, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for someone even telling me about the tech world. And luckily it happened right out of college, but just getting that information even sooner and just expanding, their opportunity of what they can do is just so inspirational. What guidance would you provide to early in career women and also those who are more senior in their careers? And how important is helping other women to make sure that they feel like they belong?
Yeah. So my first thing would be to say, stop second guessing yourself. I know when I was younger, I used to worry, and maybe that imposter syndrome, right? Did I know enough? Was I smart enough? Especially, as I mentioned, my first job out of college, going public with, a company, I didn't know anything about that. But how I surrounded myself with people who did, and I asked a lot of questions, and I learned a lot, and I realized I actually did know some things that could apply. And so, as we all have experiences, we all have learnings that we've taken along the way. So stop second guessing yourself. Trust your gut. Your gut is your best friend. It is your judgment. It is your core. And that's something that, as a younger woman, I wish I would have told myself more of that, or surrounded myself with other women who would reinforce and encourage that. I think learning how to be uncomfortable, or being comfortable being uncomfortable. So, being uncomfortable and pushing yourself and your limits constantly. That's how I've learned in my career, is trial by fire, is just putting myself in situations and really being comfortable with the fact that I will learn it, and not that I know it 100% before I do that, but comfortable that it's a learning opportunity for me. Even now, in the last 2 years, I probably have learned more in my career than I have adding up in the last 20 some odd years. And because we're doing an entire digital transformation, there is a whole new language that we didn't even know. There's a whole new way of working that we didn't know. And that has been so thrilling to be a part of learning something. And there are times where I've found myself in the last 2 years thinking, there is no way I'm going to figure this out, or I don't know anything about this. But being okay with that and finding those people who can support you and understand, what you need to learn to move past that. So I'd say, surrounding yourself with supporters is really important, and also getting sponsors who can understand what your strengths are and help you to see how you can apply those strengths in the new ways that you're learning, or new career path that you might be taking.
Thank you for that. And yeah, learning something new and failing is so scary. My second role, I'm also a boomerang. So was at Cisco, left Cisco, and I'm so happy to be back. But my second role that I had at Cisco, I did this project that I didn't have that much information on, and I submitted it to my director. I was reporting to a senior director at the time, and he's like, wrong, do it again. No other context. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is so terrifying. And I thought I wasn't doing a good job, but then, I just started to ask more questions. And I think that working for him and learning that it's okay to not do it right the first time. And it helped me to not do everything like to perfection the first time. So I wasn't wasting the time and I was evolving things as I was going. So I love that. And one thing that I wanted to kind of click in is you've mentioned a few times about a sponsor. And that really sticks out to me. And I've heard from so many other people that they've also struggled with, taking that next step. They've maybe been able to get a mentor, but really finding those next steps to obtain that sponsorship. Do you have any actions that mentees can take to help them stand out to obtain a sponsor?
Yeah. So, and just because not everybody understands the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. A mentor is someone who you can be yourself with, you can learn from, there's a great exchange back and forth. And there's somebody who's helping you, maybe a coach, for example, is that kind of mentoring relationship. But a sponsor is somebody who sees you, they see your strengths, and they're willing to put their own sort of credibility and advocacy behind you. They're the ones talking about you when the doors are closed, right, to their peers to say, this person is somebody that I stand behind, that I advocate. So those are the two differences. From a sponsorship standpoint, I would love to encourage all of the senior executives on this call to think about who you're sponsoring and what women can you raise up and give visibility to. And asking the men and who are also at your senior ranks to do the same. Because the more we can sponsor, the more women we can provide visibility to. And to help maybe gain a sponsor is to put yourself in situations where you can meet new people who are influential in your company or influential in an organization that you want to be a part of. You have to kind of put yourself out there, but you want to do it in the best possible way that really showcase your strengths. So perhaps doing a special project or getting involved in a committee that has, a group of people that you haven't met yet, or doing something where you can advocate for, yourself or your team in some particular way. That's always a great way to provide visibility. And, it's important. I was listening today. I listen every morning to Squawk Box every morning just to see what's going on in the markets. And there was a gentleman talking about a company that they just acquired. And he was rattling down all the people who are going to be on the company's board. And he was like, this guy who was my business partner at this company, and this guy who, is a great and a big investor that I've met along this path, and this guy who I sat on this board with, right? And they were all guys, for one, right? But they were all people that he knew from past experiences. Okay. This is why it's so important that we as women start talking about this woman who we were partnering with on this project, and this woman who we sat on the board with over here, and this person that we did this project with, right? How can we start to build this community of inclusion around us so that we can bring more women to the table?
Yeah, that's a very important point, and I've been fortunate to have experienced that in my career where someone had said something positive about me to help me get to know the next leader that I would be reporting to. And it really is going back to the relationships, but I think that you're right. We need to be more intentional about lifting other people up and lifting other women up and sharing those experiences. I want to go back. You said strengths so many times and how important that they are. And I've been a part of a few different groups at Cisco where they are always saying, let's bring up your strengths. Let's learn how to identify them and identifying your brand. And sometimes I feel like, okay, I I don't know, like I feel like everybody's doing this in my role. So do you have any advice for those of us who maybe need a little help on identifying our strengths and how we can use them to progress in our career?
Yeah, for sure. One just comment though on getting visibility. Sometimes as women, we're afraid to ask for that. And so I just want to point that out. It's really important that we need to advocate for ourselves and ask for a spot on that committee or on that special project, or ask to maybe do a presentation in front of the executive team. And it might feel really scary to do that, but it's important. And that's putting yourself out there and getting out of your comfort zone, so to speak. But playing to your strengths is important, and understanding, I mean, even just something as simple as doing a strengths finder. And I know Cisco has a million assessment tools, I'm sure, that you could choose from to understand that more. But I just also learned that your strengths are when you feel really confident. There's things that I'm sure, and Nicole, you are so smart. You're so technical. Like, there's things you do that are just so natural to you that it would take me a week to try to figure out how to do something, right? And so what is it that you do that you're just so natural doing, right? And how do you feel when you do those things? And if you're younger in your career, kind of taking note of that and really understanding what those things are, or things that just make you want to jump out of bed and say, this is going to be an awesome day because I get to do fill in the blank, or I get to be with, or I get to be a part of fill in the blank. Like, those are the things that really drive you and your passion. And when you're passionate about something, you're going to be really good at it. And so, playing to that passion and really understanding what drives that is important. And doing that, in your personal life, obviously we do that all the time. How do you marry that up with your career and your work life too?
Mhm. I like the advice of taking note of it, especially early in your career, because I feel like when you're fresh in your career and very energized and you just think you're going to remember it. And I'll tell you, after being in the industry for a long time, you don't. So definitely write it down. I want to kind of pivot a little. I know I've forgotten so many things already. It's terrible. I did start writing it down now, though. I want to pivot a little bit to our second most popular theme for this event that we've been asked to talk about is holistic well-being. And I wanted to know how you balanced your personal and your professional challenges, and you still continued your ascent to an executive level in a technology industry where women are the minority.
Yeah, it's not easy. I just would say, work-life balance really doesn't exist. It's a daily balancing act of many, many things. And, I think it's important that we as women advocate for, everyone who has to take care of a family or has to take care of, a parent. I am personally right in the middle of both. I've got two teenage girls and a mom who's 81. And I am definitely that sandwich generation, right in the middle of taking care of both sides of it. And what I would say is that I am very intentional about how I go about doing my work life in terms of what are the things that I need to prioritize. How must I spend my time, right, in the best possible, most impactful way? And then I'll ask my girls, for example, what are the things that I need to be a part of your life in? Like, what are things I cannot miss? You need to please tell me what those things are so that I can put those in my calendar so I don't miss those things. And stuff always comes up. It always does, inevitably, and how to juggle through that. And luckily, I think we both work at great companies of, people who understand, right? When you might not go on that business trip because there's something important at home. For example, late last year, I I wasn't able to go to an award ceremony that I really wanted to be at because my daughter's choir concert was the same night, and I really needed to be there because that was one of her non-negotiable events. And so it's just making those choices along the way. And that's what I've learned, as a woman in a career. I had a great friend who was a mentor, and she was a vice president. She ended up being a vice president and has retired from Procter & Gamble. And she used to always tell me that you got to make choices. And you also have to make firm boundaries about what you can and can't do in your life. Starting your day at whatever time or ending your day at whatever time because of obligations that you have to do. And just making that really clear and setting those boundaries, and that it's okay to do that, and that there's different seasons of your life and your career too. And knowing that in some parts of your life, you might need to, slow down or step back a little bit because you've got other obligations that you need to focus on. And there's other parts of your life when you can accelerate and move forward. Or you might be at a place where you've got, a stay-at-home partner, right, who can help with things so that you can focus more on your career, and you've got a partner at home who can focus more on the things that are at home or with your family. So that's sort of maybe how to think about going through that whole balancing act. Learned a lot during the pandemic. I had a daughter who went through a lot of depression, and she had tore her ACL right before the pandemic. And so then she was out. She's an athlete, and it was really hard for her not to get out there and do any kind of sport. And so I learned a lot about mental health. Our whole family, went through a lot of stress. And it is important to prioritize mental health. Mental health is very real, and it's something that we have to take very seriously. And so that's something, now that I've kind of brought into my dialogue with my team before, we have one-on-ones. It's, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? Talk to me, right? And then we get to the business stuff, because I think we need to connect first when we meet in one-on-ones, and then we can get to the business stuff. And that stuff's pretty easy to get to after that.
Yeah. And that's amazing that you start those conversations off like that. And thank you so much for sharing your personal experiences. For those of us who are not at the C level, or maybe don't have that initial starting of the meeting with the how are you doing personally, we don't often get to see that human aspect. And I know in one of our previous conversations, you mentioned superwoman by day and mom by night. And we see that superwoman side a lot in the workplace. Do you have any advice for those who may have personal struggles on how to have those difficult conversations in the workplace?
Yeah, I think you just have to be honest and transparent about what's going on with your life, right? Having empathy as a leader is really important, and understanding where people are at, and meeting them, as much as possible, getting them support if that's needed too. But I've had to have many difficult conversations with people going through all kinds of things, and also change. I mean, there is no company right now that is not going through a massive amount of change. And we all sort of accept change in different ways and shapes and forms, and understanding where you're at and kind of your mindset about change and about things that are happening in your life, because your mindset controls a lot of your actions, is really important. And that's, our own personal job to really understand and manage our mindsets or our attitudes about things. But as a leader, understanding what's going on with somebody and being able to have that kind of frank conversation to say, this is what we need to do as a business, and this is important for us to do as a business, and this is what we need you to do as part of this business. And if you're not okay doing that as part of this business, that's okay. I respect that, right? But this is the direction we need to go in. And if you need to go in a different direction, that's something I do respect, right? And having those kind of conversations and being open to having those kind of conversations, right? And I think that, not every job is for everybody, right? And so you kind of go back to the conversation we had earlier about your strengths. How can you understand how your strengths can apply in a new role or a different role, right? And what could you do maybe to talk to your supervisor or your leader that you're working with or other leaders around you about how that might be a good connection for you, or what, maybe doing some brainstorming with those folks to understand what is it that you could be doing differently, or what other roles could be available to you, right? So I think those are the kinds of kind of open, transparent conversations that are really important to have along the way.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned change, and I mean, I know a lot of the different industries are going through massive change, but I feel like over the past 2 years, the tech industry has had massive change and uncertainty. Do you have advice for those who are, trying to put themselves in situations that they maybe don't feel ready for, and it's causing some stress to come up when they're trying to learn new tasks, or they're going to a new organization and working with new teammates, on how to navigate all of that uncertainty?
Yes. And I would say it's scary and it's okay, but we cannot have a scarcity mindset. Like, we have to think about abundance. I know that AI is going to take everybody's jobs. That is not true. I'm sorry. It's not true. No technology is going to take over anything.
But
okay. Like, we've
I
had
saw
this
McDonald's
conversation.
though that did.
Right? No, I firmly believe that there is more opportunity that's out there the more that we think. I was reading somewhere earlier this week about this woman who was an imagination, what does she call herself? An imagination consultant or something like that. And it was this idea that if you can imagine it, it exists, right? And I know this kind might sound a little bit woo-woo, but the point is that you have to have an abundance thinking mentality and start to think, what more could we do? What else could we do? Or just plainly, why not? Why not try this? Or why not try that? And that's something we're doing a lot at Ingram Micro right now, because the way we're transforming as a company has not yet been defined. And so we have to be the ones thinking, what if, or what could we be doing, or how do we need to connect with our customers? What do we need to be doing to help them more, right? And asking all those questions and supporting that ideation and that sort of new innovative thought, and testing out little things and trying little things. You don't want to try big things, because then you have big failures. But testing little things and having small failures and learning from that is brilliant. And that's the way new things are created and new ideas are, become even bigger ideas.
And testing out big things also in personal life doesn't always work out well either. I have a broken collarbone, sending it too much off of a jump.
Yes.
So I saw in the Q&A that they're just wanting to maybe click in another level on. We spoke about integration with the well-being and also accelerating the career when maybe you are still, have those family needs and the caregivers. If you're not wanting to step back in your career or say no to things, how did you find integrating those two and still being able to progress the career?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to your tribe. So, who's on your tribe, and who can help you? Who's on your team to help you with the things that you need to your obligations at home, right? Some of it might be sacrificing some things. Like, I am totally OCD, and that means like my house has to be clean, right? Well, I had to kind of step back, and my house didn't have to be clean 24/7, and I had to get over it for a little while, right? Because I couldn't afford to have a housekeeper come in every week. And so I just had to get over it. And then when my girls got a little bit older, I got to delegate that responsibility out and sort of hold them accountable to different things and chores in the house. There's a woman that I know who is a huge career person, and she's got 3 kids, and where she lives with a whole neighborhood of mostly stay-at-home moms. And so that's her crew. And they help her with her kids while she's traveling and doing all kinds of things, literally globally around the world. And her neighbors are her crew and helping with her kids and picking them up and doing the things that, she needs to have done because her husband works as well. And so I think there's varying degrees of who your crew can be. You're either paying for your crew or you're, asking for help from your friends and family for your crew, or you have a partner who is able potentially to stay home more or work part-time or what have you. But there are different choices that you have to make throughout that time to make those things work, I believe.
And I think that's an important point of, when you sometimes in a professional setting, you're thinking about your tribe and you're thinking about your coworkers and, just the people, you work with, or maybe the partner organization that you're working with, but maybe extending that out to the neighborhood that's a great example. I know during the pandemic, especially, we saw, people leaving the workforce or maybe taking their hours down a little bit to help with their family. And so they saw like a little bit of slowdown professionally. And now that things are kind of starting to come back a little bit, they're struggling to ramp back up and they're ready to do that. Do you have any advice on ramping back up?
Yeah, I guess, what I would say is visibility and relationships are really important. So, what could you be doing to start to build relationships, perhaps with teams or with people that, you need to work more closely with, and being able to kind of juggle your time to do that. And that might be sort of, again, making some sacrifices or trying to figure out, how you can get sort of childcare in different places so you can have that visibility. But I think prioritizing that is really important. Understanding what the business needs are and maybe what the big business opportunities are and how you might be able to contribute to that in some way, and having those conversations maybe with different business leaders to get that understanding. That also can help you kind of get into maybe that special project that is really impactful or piloting something that's new that you could get some new and different visibility on. That might be another way of doing that as well. And even, doing something personally that might give you some experience or exposure to something that you might actually be able to bring back into the workforce too. That could be another way of transferring sort of that personal time into the work time as well.
Mm-hmm. And, that can go back to the informational interviews that you spoke about earlier and learning more about the different parts of the organization too. So for us, so we're talking about supporting women and belonging. What are some actions that every woman can take away to support themselves and also support other women?
Yeah, I would say one, give yourself some grace. We're way too hard on ourselves. Um, One of the things that we've learned from our chief digital officer, he talks a lot about being perfectly imperfect. And I know our marketing team is a lot of perfectionists, and we've used that phrase a lot, is like, we need to be perfectly imperfect. Every day we're going to get a little better. And just giving yourself the grace to say every day, I will do something a little better. Or, you know what, today wasn't a great day. That's okay. Tomorrow's going to be great. Okay. So that's number one. Number two is what can we all do to help one another, right? If you see something in another woman that you really admire, tell her that. Reach out and say, what,
Mhm.
you're really good at this, right? Or I could really use your help with this, right? How can you sort of inspire that collaboration and really getting, work together? Maybe perhaps in the Women of Impact group, finding out what some themes are that the women in the group could be to apply to where Cisco is growing as a business, and what the Women of Impact group could do to really help Cisco accelerate that growth in some ways. There's a lot of really cool things you guys are doing as a company, and how the Women of Impact group could play a role in that, and how the women could get collective ideas together and working on some of that work effort, perhaps. I think just also as executives, what can we be doing to help more women be more visible and encourage that? And as women, we need to ask for it. How can we constantly be asking for what more could I be doing? How can I get to the next level if that's what you want to do? Or how can I grow my current career and expertise? What could I learn that I don't know yet, right? And just asking those questions of the people that you're working with and around will also help to develop your career too.
Yeah, and speaking of asking those questions, is there a good way or a good, do you bring those up with your manager, to your coworkers? How do you suggest bringing those questions up?
Everywhere with everyone. Definitely. I mean, I think a lot of people, and I'm not going to say just women, people think that their managers are mind readers. They're not. Like, they don't know what's going on in your head, or what's maybe things that you're thinking about, or maybe that you're challenged with, or that you're excited about. So how are you having those ongoing kind of open discussions? Also, your tribe. How can you have good dialogue with the people that are around you and supporting you? Making sure that you have people around you that check you too. I've got people who also tell me honestly things that I don't see because I've got blind spots. We all have blind spots. So, what can we be doing to surround ourselves with people who are willing to tell us the difficult things, or give us that really good constructive feedback too? So I would talk across, up, and below you, asking questions of people who might be newer in their career than you are, and understanding more about how they see you or what they see as opportunities, because they're going to see things that you probably don't at all too. So having that dialogue all around is really healthy, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And having that dialogue, have you had kind of negotiation skills come up, and in creating a mindset to cultivate that?
Yeah, I would think, I would recommend any books or like LinkedIn Learning or whatever learning tools that you have available at Cisco or your other organizations. Anything about negotiating skills. The art of negotiation is useful in any part of your career, not just in asking for more money, but it is a great skill set to have in maybe bartering through something of conflict, right? And finding that sort of happy middle ground that you can have in a conflict situation, or in change, and understanding what it is that you can negotiate the changes maybe that need to happen versus where life is and reality is today, and how we can kind of move towards that change, and really using those negotiating skills to get people to understand how to do that. Those skills apply in so many ways. So if you haven't learned that or read a book around that, I highly recommend that.
I like that and a lot. And, you know, using Audible to just to listen if you don't have time to read them. This has been such an amazing session. I appreciate all of the insights that you've shared. You are truly an inspiration, and the advice that you've shared today has been invaluable. Thank you so much for being a part of our Women of Impact.
Thank you, Nicole. I
All
really
right.
appreciate it. And thank you.